Since time immemorial, the waters of the Salish Sea have provided abundant resources of fish and other sea life sustaining the Salish peoples. Early evidence from ancient shell middens, which are refuse piles found at prehistoric village sites, indicates that the first people here were hunters and red meat eaters. Clovis points, arrow and spearheads discovered on Whidbey Island, date back more than 10,000 years. The oldest bones in the deepest layers of midden are almost all those of mammals and birds. But then as time passed, fish bones and bivalve shells took over, demonstrating that early peoples developed a taste for seafood, which made sense. Foods such as clams and mussels were always fresh and available.
My family has been fishing here on the Skagit since time immemorial. Our people had perfected the art of catching salmon for generations, for thousands and thousands of years. We used fish weirs, we used fish traps, we used gill nets made out of materials that we harvested from the land, and they used spears, so they had different methods of catching salmon.
Early dependence on the sea for food inspired development of unique and effective native fishing implements and techniques. Most of these examples are from the mid-1800s to early 1900s. Thanks to an excellent book by Hilary Stewart titled Indian Fishing, we have illustrations and explanations of how some of this very specialized gear worked, long before days of nylon nets and steel hooks. Native fishermen noticed that hungry cod follow moving objects toward the surface, so codfish lures were carved from cedar to roughly resemble a modern badminton shuttlecock. Placed on the end of a long pole, they pushed the lure underwater. Several poles, end to end, could be used to get the lure deeper. Jerking the pole slightly caused it to release and upend, slowly rising to the surface, where a fish spear waited for any cod curious enough to follow. To create fish hooks, natives designed a system that involved steam bending wood from the yew tree into a shape like the letter U. The wood was placed inside a piece of bull kelp stem, sealed at both ends and cooked slowly at the edge of a hot fire. The softened hook was then formed on a board with small pegs to hold its shape. The last step, lashing a bone, wood, or metal barb to one end, where bait could be attached. Two of these lures were suspended by a fine line of woven cedar bark from a strong, flexible tree branch. Rock sinkers could be released when a halibut took the bait. The branch with the two hooks connected to a heavier line braided from smoke-dried bull kelp, smoked to toughen the line. Sometimes that line connected to a small sealskin bladder to help keep it from drifting. Also used as a marker and to serve as extra drag on the hooked halibut to help tire it out. Fishermen could wait in canoes, tending more than one set of hooks, or on the shore to check their rigs during the day.
My great-great-grandfather, Kel Kaltsoot, signed the Point Elliott Treaty in 1855 that ceded millions of acres to the federal government. It was a retained right, a right that we had kept when we negotiated the treaty. It wasn't something that the white man says, okay, we're going to give you the ability to catch salmon.
Bringing home a halibut was more challenging than simply setting the hook. There was still the challenge of hauling a 200-pound fish into a bobbing, tipping canoe. The first step involved clubbing the fish and impaling it through the gills with a heavy spear. Then in one smooth motion, with the spear resting on one leg, pressure from the other leg would flip the halibut into the canoe. A lot of work, a lot of muscle, and practice, but well worth it. Smaller bottom fish like flounder and sole were abundant in Pen Cove. Younger fishermen made a game of wading out, feeling for fish under their bare feet. The fisherman, spearing his catch, showed skill by not also spearing his foot. The fish were then tossed ashore or into a nearby canoe. Flounder were caught in a simple flat net with 3 sides of the net laid on the bottom in shallow water. They used rocks for sinkers and carved cedar for floats. Older men and boys gathered at the floating end with their backs to the shore, while younger men splashed, driving bottom fish to swim above the submerged net. Then, folding the 3 net sides like a purse, they captured the fish inside as they dragged the net to shore. Salmon were caught in a variety of ways. Fishermen developed elaborate fishing weirs and traps to confuse fish, making it easier to spear, net, or club them as they found their way around the man-made obstacles. With salmon running upstream to spawn, weirs were placed across the river. They were made from long, straight branches lashed with woven cedar bark or nettle rope, and with a boardwalk of cedar planks for the fishermen to cross on to tend the weir. As with the halibut, they also caught salmon with carved bone hooks on hand lines woven from nettle fiber, bait attached in such a way to wiggle like an injured fish. Savvy fishermen know salmon can't resist an easy prey. To cleverly harpoon salmon, fishermen visited kelp beds at low tide and cut a channel through vegetation to make an inviting path for the fish, which also made it easy to see the salmon swimming below. With the canoe in place over the path in the kelp, a harpoon with a detachable bonehead was thrust into the salmon that had chosen this path. They also caught fish in well-made nets constructed from the fibers of stinging nettles, created in a similar manner to European nets. They made net-weaving tools of cedar using specially sized gauges to assure uniformity. To make fish traps, they lined large nets camouflaged with harvested eelgrass to trick fish into thinking they were passing along the bottom instead of entering a closed pen. Reef nets, gill nets, beach seine, and many other styles of hand net were also skillfully and successfully used. They caught herring by using dip nets or herring rakes, which were long flat poles with many sharpened bones or sticks protruding straight out. By thrusting them into a school of herring, many small fish could be impaled on the tines. Smelt, herring, and eulachon were caught with rakes or dip nets made of nettle fiber. Strung on long poles with rectangular frames, the nets were tossed into the surf. These small fish were strung on cedar sticks, sinew, or nettle line, and then smoke-dried by the thousands. Their oil was caught in clamshells during the drying process and stored in bull kelp bulbs. It was an important dietary ingredient, also valuable for trading. Natives keenly observed that herring deposited eggs on floating tree or kelp branches. So they began to deliberately place cedar boughs in the water to attract herring spawn. The branches were retrieved and harvested for the attached eggs, a rich delicacy still enjoyed by connoisseurs worldwide. The cedar branch gathering technique continues to be used by herring egg harvesters even now. All parts of fish were valued by the native peoples. With salmon typically opened like a book from the dorsal side, their backbones were removed and smoked in the longhouse to be sucked on and enjoyed. Heads and tails were also smoked and savored as delicacies. The eyes and cheeks were a special treat. Hearts, livers, and salmon skin were eaten along with the flesh or roasted on a stick. Any spare parts were fed to the family dogs. Even non-edible fish served a useful purpose. Dogfish livers provided oil for a fine lubricant or for lamp fuel. Its rough skin, when dried, made excellent sandpaper, which was popular with native carvers. Natives of the Salish Sea knew salmon and other fish to be their life givers. Many believed that fish and all animals of their world were people at one time, their relatives.
Here at Swinomish, we've always been taught to thank our Creator for the salmon, for the crab, for the clams, for the gooey duck, for the prawns, for the smelt, for the shrimp, for the herring, for everything that we are able to harvest. And we are always taught that, we have to give thanks to our Creator for providing this for us. And so usually the third week of May of every year, we come together and we have a first salmon ceremony and a blessing of the fleet. The first salmon ceremony is a ceremony that we do. We harvest the king salmon and we provide the king salmon to our elders and to our people. And we return the carcass back to the waters, and we raise our hands to our Creator, thanking Him for providing that king salmon for us.
Native peoples have ancestral rights to catch and harvest salmon here. These rights are continued and guaranteed by the terms of the treaties of the mid-1800s, requiring tribes to surrender their homelands to the U.S. government. These are not new rights, but recognition of ancient rights of origin that predate the coming of European Americans. But even with treaties in place, preserving fishing rights has been an ongoing challenge. Fisheries are critically important to Northwest Natives as a source of income and a source of food, but also as a way of celebrating and preserving Native culture. To this day, many tribal fishermen are active environmentalists who keenly understand the importance of clean water in sustaining the life cycle of fish and therefore of humans, and of the part clean water plays in the preservation of all life on our planet.
In 3, 4, 5 generations, I would like my descendants to be able to be filmed like this, sharing the story that the salmon is still spawning, wild salmon is still spawning in the tributaries of the Skagit River. That would be something that I think everyone should be proud of.